You're listening to the Coach's Journey podcast, exposing the struggles and celebrating the successes in the life of coaches who are action takers and creating authentic impact in today's world. Whether you're just starting out, expanding your reach, or exploding your impact, you're in the right place right now. Stay tuned and be sure to subscribe to this podcast. Now, here are your hosts of the Coach's Journey podcast.
We wanted you to kind of get open to doing these calls because that's what will do a lot of the improving. But now maybe we can start with challenges. Daniel, maybe you can share what doesn't work or what hasn't worked for you in these strategy sessions. And then we'll go to what has.
Let me think back. And honestly, I think to my most, like in every single session I have, there's something that didn't work great, and because there's always room to improve. So don't think that you're ever going to perfect it because you're always getting better because there's no such thing as perfection. But what doesn't work is coming in insecure. That's rough. You come in insecure, it's going to really stand in the way of you being able to serve, as well as being able to make that offer confidently. I feel like that's the biggest killer is just
what does that look like, Daniel, when somebody shows up insecure?
Yeah, it's oh, I really need this client. That's neediness is not a good word for something that doesn't work. Another good example of something that doesn't work, which is oh, I really need this client, or I don't know if I'm gonna be good enough, or I'm afraid of getting rejected. It's if you're framing it in terms of things that are gonna make you feel bad, or if you're framing it in terms of it matters whether the client says yes or no to you as a person, it's your own self-worth on the line. All those we're always gonna have our own associations and self-worth around our work, but when it's to the point where it's staying in your mind, you're entering that call with that as a frame, that usually doesn't work.
Yeah. And I've actually learned that I love what Steve Chandler actually uses that term, don't be needy.
Yeah.
Don't show up needy. And actually most of the reason why coaches show up as needy, and I did too, so it's not a judgment, is because of the money piece. It's oh, I need to get the sales because something is off. And if you enter the session with that mindset of closing this person, or I need this sale, all sorts of things will come in that will interfere with you serving this person. All sorts of challenges in your own thought processes, your own insecurities, all sorts of things will just arise. And what Steve Chandler clearly says, if you need money, get a job right now. Find a way to make money until you can build this. So I would say give yourself at least a 6-month cushion, if not more. You will make money, but it might not be the first month or the second month. You need to put in a little bit of time in this to work it out. And it might sound disheartening, but I always ask coaches, either you have a cushion in terms of the money you've saved, or you have a job or something in the background. Focus on making the money from there until you see that you can actually do this. And when you do that, when you put that aside and you make this a long-term goal, you make this a career path, you make this as a way to serve people, what ends up happening is that you show up with a very different intention. I just need to serve you. And would you say that's what you're trying to communicate, Daniel?
Yeah, I love how you elaborated. I'll turn it back to you. What else doesn't work, Faisal?
So I love that you started with that. For me, one of the areas we all, assuming that you come from a certification or you've gone some sort of training in coaching that you've gone through, and every certification, one of the things that they do is they promote their process, which is fine. Nothing wrong with that. For example, Daniel and I, at least one of our certifications is certified high performance coaching. When you look at the way that the strategy session, they give you a framework around that. And that's one of the better ones that give you actually a framework. When you go to another certification, they might not even give you a framework. They'll give you a set of principles or foundational key things that you go through. And then you kind of have to put it together and make it into a strategy session for yourself or a discovery call. But let's say they're giving you this, you're jumping in, and this is my thought process. When I was kind of running through that, I didn't know how to navigate it in the sense that, how do I take the client from this point to this point using the framework or foundational principles around it? And what would end up happening is I would get stuck in the framework a lot of times. I would get in. So, and I'm thinking the people who are teaching this or the certifications, they're kind of stuck with their own framework too. They're giving you the framework with which you're going to work with, but coaches get stuck in their own head with that framework. So what I kept doing was I was trying to kind of fit the client into that framework. But a lot of times clients might not need you to kind of put them into that framework. You can use the framework. And the way I started to look at framework is it's a tool for me to support clients a little bit faster, a little bit better. But it's not the thing that will necessarily exactly help them. So follow your framework and everything. But one of the things that made an improvement for me was for me to do a lot of discovery in the beginning, is to help me understand what exactly are their challenges, whether or not it fits into the framework. I need to understand how to support them with that, not fit them into the framework that might or might not support them. So and they kind of teach that in certifications, but we kind of lose sight of that when we kind of go through the framework. So I started to spend a good amount of my time, especially the first 30 minutes, is trying to understand, why are they there? What do they think their challenges are? What is their perception of their life? How are they looking at their life? And where do they see their life going? And it gave me a good view of where I can take this conversation towards, versus kind of, hey, let me go through this piece of it, that piece of it, and maybe I'll come up with something. What are your thoughts about that?
I would say, yes, I would totally agree with that. I think for beginner coaches, a lot of the time, the framework is actually the thing that helps them learn that process, learn what you just said. So if you're going through your standard frameworks or your particular process in your particular course or frame or certification, that's sometimes how you get the reps to figure out where to use it and where not to. That's how I did anyway. Starting with what's provided is usually good. Like I like to say what Ryan Levesque says, which is sometimes it's good to emulate before you innovate. But there's a reason that there's a lot of different frameworks. It's like a lot of them apply to different kinds of people and different situations. And so I like having a number of different frameworks that I can draw on as a tool belt. But the most important framework for you is serving the client from where the client is at. And I think I love the word discovery session more than a strategy session sometimes, because it's a reminder for me that I'm here to discover as much as possible about the client so that I can serve them best. So like focusing that session on discovery. So like a lot of times, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't, but a lot of times we want to coach the whole session and really solve all the problems in that session. And to be honest, like if they're coming to you for coaching, a lot of problems can't be solved that quickly. Some may be able to, but oftentimes you give somebody the solution, it's actually not the solution. And so they actually need a deeper process to get to more solutions and outcomes that they're looking for. So a lot of times it's very good to just discover as much as you can. So failure to discover is a great way to not sign a client, because not only do you not really know, the client doesn't know, because like discovery is helpful for them to express for themselves what the things are that they need to be like focused on, or that their goals are. So I like to, so what didn't really work for me was just trying to solve problems only in that session, and I had to move from a problem solver to a coach, which problem solving can be part of coaching, but I like to focus on, like what I learned is focus instead on discovering as much as possible, do some coaching, help the client solve their own problems, maybe have a quick win, maybe have a couple of takeaway actions they can do right away. But like ultimately the point of it is, if the transformation the client needs is not going to happen in one session, which is probably why they came to you, then you're going to have to help them make some decisions. And so the thing that doesn't work is not being able to help client make decisions. It's like not focusing on the decisions that they need to make for themselves. Specifically, if it's the right next step for them to join your program, that's a decision they need to make if you get to that point in the session, and that's the right thing. So being able to help them through that process. I didn't understand that. And so the thing that didn't work for me is like, sign up for my coaching. They're like, oh no, I'm good. they were not ready. So not addressing those fears and not being able to create the space for them to understand that you're helping them make a decision that's good for them. So that's the thing that doesn't work, which is like doing it for yourself. So you can get the sale, right? Which is sort of contradictory in a way, but it's also true.
A couple of phrases you use and then you corrected it afterwards, or you elaborated on afterwards. One is like, don't do coaching, do discovery. But the thing that most initial coaches think as coaching, that's not actually what coaching might be. The deeper forms of coaching is exactly. Like you said, problem solving. And I've heard this over and over from at least 10 different coaches who have asked them, like, what do you do? Like, because when I get on a call with them, I want to know how they're, especially those who are struggling with getting clients and if they've done a few calls, I'm like, can you walk me through what you do? And they will say this almost very similar to each other. And they will say that in the beginning, so my focus is to kind of get them to share their challenges and pick one area where I can give them a quick win, problem solving, quick win, and then I offer my program and find out what their goal is, and I offer my program as a bridge. This is the basic format of a sales call. Find out what their pain points are, what their goals are, and your program is a bridge. Now, the problem is they're focusing on a quick win without doing all the discovery. So they don't actually, whatever they think is the pain point is probably not the actual pain point. And to make it worse, the client might not even know what their actual pain points are until you've done the discovery, because the discovery itself brings up a lot of things that they're not even aware of. And one of the biggest reasons why clients, I would say, sign up with me is that they realize things that they never thought about. I still remember I was doing a session. This was a very funny session with this doctor, with this physician, ER physician. And we went through, it was a 2-hour session. I think his wife was sitting across him on the other side of the room and listening to the whole thing the whole time.
Did you know that at the beginning?
I didn't know that. I did not know that. So I found that out at the end of it. So I'm going through the whole session, and let me see if I remember the specifics. So he had structured his life a certain way. He he was one of those ER physicians he was in the military world, but he was also an ER physician within that context. And he didn't have to work a lot. He only worked about, I think, 12 days out of the month. But the way he had structured his life was a complete mess. He didn't know how to do work. He was unfocused. He was ADD about a lot of things. He didn't know how to connect with people with his time. So his time was all over the place. We went through a whole discovery, and we figured out a few challenges of why he was thinking he should have structured it.
How did you go through that discovery? Share a little more detail on that.
So I'll share the detail. Before the detail, I want to just share this part. So as I went through the discovery, he came to a point where he realized something. There was an insight there, and all I did was ask him, well, based on what you've shared, how can you structure your life a little bit differently? He's like, oh, I can just go talk to my boss, and I can restructure my calendar in this way, and I can do this and the other. He came up with the solution, the whole solution. Not the whole solution for all the problems, but within that context. And he looked frustrated. I'm like, how do you feel right now? He's like, to be honest, a little bit frustrated. I don't know why I didn't come up with this myself. And then he smiled. He's like, my wife is kind of laughing at me from across the room because she isn't listening to it, because he was kind of, his ego was hurt a little bit in that moment. And I told him, like, this is very common. Like a lot of times solutions are not that obvious for us when we're trying to figure this stuff out. We all have blind spots in that space. So I kind of had to give him a little bit that this is not just you. But the way I went through, so the structure of it is that I spent a good 30-40 minutes in the beginning just actually understanding different aspects of his life, what's happening, what are his challenges. And one of the reasons, like I mentioned, a lot of coaches go towards a quick win because they notice one challenge, they just jump into that, they coach them through that, or they problem solve through that. I didn't do that. I tried to figure out what's actually happening and in terms of what he thinks his challenges are, where are there areas that he thinks he needs to grow in, what is his perception, how does he think about these problems? What does he think brings that fulfillment, happiness, all that stuff? What does he think that is not good in his life? What does he think that's positive? So I'm doing a lot of discovery, and I'm trying to also figure out what is his short-term process, what is his long-term vision around what he's trying to do. And as I'm doing that, usually when I get to the long-term piece, the vision, based on that, I usually ask them, go into that. How would you structure your life a little bit differently based on what you want to create? And usually people are not long-term thinkers. He's thinking maybe 1 year out, 2 years out. But when we look out 5 years out, the kind of life he's creating, or 6 years or 10 years out, his thinking changes around his life. It's like, oh, if I really want to live that life, I can't wait 5 years. I can make a bunch of changes right now, and the rest I can strategically set it up. And he quickly came up with a solution himself, at least around that area. So that discovery piece around different parts of his life makes a huge difference in helping the client understand their own thinking process and how they're feeling, how they can structure it a little bit differently. I don't have to do much around the problem solving. They do it themselves. And I think that also for a lot of coaches, because they might also go with this mindset that I need to help solve something for them. You actually don't need to do that. A lot of the times clients do the solving. You just need to help stay with them and get them to go deeper and deeper into their own challenges and into their own and how they're thinking about their own life, how they're structuring it, how they're connecting with other people, how they're perceiving things. And they begin to see the blocks in their own path. And I think that's what leads to the solution. Now, I will mention, I do focus on a couple of things. When I'm doing this whole session, I'm looking for a big, hairy problem. And for him, that was one of those problems. He had been stuck in that routine for the past year, and he had no sleep. Even though he had a lot of time, he was jumping in, finding these businesses to invest in, but he didn't know how to focus on building that. And he didn't have enough time with his family. That was a huge part of his vision. And he didn't know how to navigate around that. He was just doing the same things over and over and hoping that the results would be different. And all of a sudden, when we did all that discovery, it became very clear to him. He's like, no, that's not how he wants to do these things. He wants to make a shift. And yeah, so that's one part of it. And then maybe I'll pick another quick win. Maybe that's around business, that I saw the problem and I will help him do some problem solving, but I get him to come up with the solution, not necessarily me. Was that clear?
That was pretty good. I think for all the coaches listening right now, you should rewind that whole segment and listen to it again, because there's so much gold in there. If I thought, oh my gosh. But if I were to summarize what I think you said, it's like, and we had a conversation about this in Dallas around how we do this. But like the idea of building a map of the territory is like, you kind of get a really feel of the context of their whole life. And then there are probably one or two areas where they can get a quick win, so that they know that you can get them quick wins in these conversations, but also identifying like a big problem that cannot be solved in this one session. Yeah. Right. And so those are problems that you uncover through the discovery. And the more you do of that, the more they realize they actually really need help in a lot of areas. And then addressing that over the course of the program kind of makes sense, right? Because a lot of people come in thinking they're just going to come in for the quick win and be gone, but they don't realize how valuable these wins can be for them. So I love all that. I would add a couple of high level things that I focus on in my strategy sessions. I would agree with you. It's like there's the vision and the challenges, also known as having clarity of what you want your life to be, developing that. Usually people haven't spent time there. And if they have, you can test, see how clear they are. And there's usually a little more clarity you can get with them. But I would also say the opposite. There's two sides of the coin. You want to get clarity on their vision to some degree. And you also want the clarity on the obstacles, the challenges, the problems, the struggles, because that's the pleasure that they want and the pain that's holding them back, right? And so I like to also ask them questions in those areas about why these things are important. Like, so for example, they say like, I want my life to look like this. I want to have, more time away from work. And why does that matter? And then talk about their family or something. And then they really get down to like the thing, really the core of why that piece of the vision is so important to them. And then same thing on the struggles. It's like, what are these obstacles and challenges that are holding you back? What are you struggling with? And like, why does this feel, I love to ask the question, why does that feel challenging? And what would happen if you were to not have that struggle? Like, what will that look like? And why is the struggle so important to you? And they'll tell you the reasons why this matters. And that's important because they have never felt those reasons why in a while, because they're so busy doing other things and they're not taking the time to reflect. So that's why even just the coaching itself, the session itself is valuable because they're reflecting and they're really connecting deeper with their emotions. And that's one of the big goals of the strategy and discovery session, is to connect deeply with the emotional things that are driving them towards the vision, or that they're feeling because of their struggles and their obstacles. So what feels really bad about that challenge, or what feels really good about that vision? That's a really deeper place to take them. And as you start uncovering those things, you start to see the things that are like really important to them. And then that's why those are the things that will help them make the decision to A, move forward in their life on these things, and B, move forward in the program, right? Because the program is literally going to help them with the things that they're talking about. And now they know why it's important for them, because most of the time people don't know why. So I think it's really important to cover those deeper emotional whys for people as you go through this process.
Yeah, I love that. One of the things that really stuck out to me, even from the first day of certification, I think it was Brendan Burchard that said this, is that engage their emotions or die trying. And he was not joking. He's like, that is your job as a coach. If it's all thought in their head and they're just sharing intellectual awareness of whatever's happening, it's not going to have the effect you're looking for. And through this discovery process, there's a lot of nuances in there. So we're just sharing high level here. Through the discovery process, you're getting them to feel. most people don't feel. Most people don't reflect deep enough. Most people don't go into their experience to notice it. So especially in the Western world, especially in US and Canada, if you're looking at it, most people are so busy that they haven't had time to notice what they ate. They haven't had time to notice what their partner looked like that day. They haven't had time to kind of ask what's going on with their business partners or other things. But the challenge is that when they're doing that stuff, it looks like they're moving forward, and they are at the surface level, but they're leaving behind a lot of the other things that are actually happening in their subconscious. So you're bringing up a lot of that stuff when you're asking these questions. They're starting to feel it. And great coaches, they will notice the emotions on their faces. And part of what you're doing is you're checking in with them. So this is bringing up, I can see that there's something around this that's making you feel, or there are emotions that are coming up. Can you share a little bit? Now you're going even deeper. And they're like, I didn't know that was there a lot of times. I didn't know I felt like this about this. I didn't know I was neglecting my wife. I didn't know I was neglecting my husband, whatever that looks like.
They may even know, but not have really taken the time to really feel what that feels like, knowing that. Like you can know up here, like, oh, I'm neglecting my wife, but like to really like face that and feel it is important. So that's why in order to get the emotions, you got to slow things down. That's why I like to do like longer sessions. So we have the time to really slow things down. So people come in trying to rush through things, and you just like, hey, let's slow this down a little bit and really get them to go through a little slower, and teaching them to slow themselves down is part of the process. So if you think, where am I going to find clients? Like everybody in North America is a potential client because of the culture, and everybody is not slowing down. So everybody can benefit from slowing down and really feel their emotions and discover for themselves what their visions are. And that's how you discover what their challenges and their obstacles are. That's how you discover it. Feel the importance of those things, and then recognize that you're the one who can help them slow down and make them feel the things they need to feel, and create that safety so they can make a decision to move forward with the program with you. That's a win-win for everybody, right?
Yeah. And I want to just share two simple things in here. A lot of times coaches might be like, well, and we're not prescribing that you should do 2-hour sessions. So I've actually experimented with 45 minutes, 1 hour, 90 minutes, and 2 hours. And main reason why, exactly as Daniel said, I want them to slow down. And coaches might hesitate with, first of all, experiment with all those. See how your process works, because your coaching might be a little bit different than ours. And so experiment with it. But let's say you're doing a longer session, let the client know that this is your process. Well, usually you ask, because a lot of coaches might hesitate. Well, what if that person is busy? What if they don't want to jump in on a 2-hour call? Give them an option. If they say 2 hours, they don't accept it, go for a 90-minute call. But tell them that this is your process. I want to go a little bit deeper here, because that will give them the data needed for them to make a better decision on their own path for themselves. And second, a lot of coaches are in a hurry to close people. So they might do one call and offer their program. That might not be the case. On average, I spend about 3 to 4 hours with a client before I get them to sign, before they sign up with me. And you might think that's a lot of time that I'm putting in that. But keep in mind that if you look at the long-term journey of a client, on average, clients will stay with me 1 year. Many of them will stay 2, 3, 4 years. That's a lot of coaching. Plus, the referral value of each client is huge. I at this point, I counted at least $100,000 for each client that signs up with me. And I've tracked that data. That's usually the case. So is 3 to 4 hours, 2 to 3 hours worth it for you to get not only revenue, but impact and serve so many people in their community or in their environment? That's for you to decide.
You're listening to the Coach's Journey podcast.